Okay, let's see. Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. You are listening to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I am your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I want to thank you all for tuning in to another show this evening. It is Tuesday, January 11th, 2022, and I'm very excited to be before you all this evening. We're going to talk about a very, very special topic for the evening. So, tonight, we are talking about adoption. Now, I want all of my adoptive parents and adoptive children and families to please, please, please listen in on this discussion. And again, feel free to leave your comments down below and reach out to me to let me know what your experience is like because I've been talking about this for the past several months and probably close to a year now since my father has passed away. It'll be almost a year in a couple of weeks. So I appreciate you all again for all of your support and encouragement for you all. You all continue to support me and uplift me, and you all continue to support my show and the work that I do in order to bring about a change. So I want to thank you all for that, and it does not go unnoticed. So I wanted to have a discussion this evening about adoption because this evening, later on in the show, we are going to speak with Miss Claire Beaman from Adoptions Together. So she's a social worker from Adoptions Together who agreed to appear on this broadcast to talk about the subject. She works from the domestic infant programs under Adoptions Together, and she's going to educate us about what it means to adopt an infant from the from from their agency. So she's going to educate us about Adoptions Together, what they do, and how that process works, and the impact that it has on families and individuals who decide to pursue that, like myself, in the next few years. So I'm going to read some reports that I've gathered and some statistics that I've researched about adoption, but I'm going to start with reports and statistics from the Department of Human Services from Maryland about adoption, just in general, so that we can all gain a better understanding of what tonight's topic is going to be about, and so that we can all have an opportunity to ask any questions or leave comments down below. And again, this is supposed to be a diverse and inclusive broadcast. So I encourage all of the birth families, adoptive children, and everyone who's a part of this community or who has played a role in this community in some way or another to listen in and to educate us and to talk about their experience with adoption and being a part of that community in terms of what that is like for them and how that has made a difference in their lives. So according to the Department of Human Services for the state of Maryland, um, it says in the subtitle, "What is adoption?" Adoption is a wonderful way to build a family. People who choose to adopt are very special. This is what the report says. This is what they tell us. They have a strong belief that all children deserve a loving family to call their home. There are many children in Maryland, and again, I'm talking about this from a local and even state-wide perspective. Again, I have other reports from a national level that I would like to share, but I want to start off with this. So there are many children in Maryland that want nothing more than to become part of a loving, stable family. The children available for adoption through the Departments of Social Services are often victims of unfortunate circumstances that lead to their need for homes. And although many of the children have special needs, their greatest need is for a permanent home where they can be loved and nurtured by dedicated individuals. Adoption Services develops permanent families for children who cannot live or safely reunite with their birth parents or extended birth parents. Adoption is the legal and emotional acceptance into your family of a child not born to you. The child will have your name and the same legal rights as a child by birth. So that was just a general overview of what adoption is. And hello, Miss Breezy. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad you were able to tune in for the show this evening. Again, for everybody who's just listening, we're talking about adoption tonight. We're having a conversation about what it's like to be a part of the adoption community, and we're also having a conversation with Miss Claire Beaman for the second half of the show about the domestic infant program and what that's like and what that process is like, and how she's been able to work with birth families and adoptive families during her time as a social worker working with adoptions together. So that was an overview of adoption and what it is. But the state of Maryland's public child welfare adoption program also talks about it from a different angle. According to the DHS, they say that our program is a foster to adopt program. In Maryland, we dually approve our resource families as fosters and adoptive families. Children are removed from their homes due to abuse and/or neglect and placed temporarily into foster and adoptive homes that have been approved by a local department of social services. The local departments are mandated by law to work towards reunifying children with their families. In some cases, children are unable to be returned home to their parents or relatives for many different reasons. The local department may recommend to the court that the child's permanency plan be changed to adoption. At that time, the local department would look to you as the foster/slash adoptive family and discuss your interest in adopting the child and making the child a permanent part of your family. In most cases, the child has been in your home for 12 months or longer. So it also goes on to say that some children who are in the custody of a local department are placed at risk, which means that the child is not yet legally free to be adopted, but steps are being taken to achieve the termination of parental rights. Therefore, the foster parents, the prospective adoptive parents, take the risk of having the child removed from their home, but the child does not face the risk of living in many foster homes before the court makes a decision. If the child becomes legally free, the foster parents or the prospective adoptive parents may adopt the child. And there are also cases where the local department may be searching for an adoptive home for a child. Excuse me. These children are already legally free for adoption and are in need of a permanent family. In some cases, a child may be in an improved an adoptive home. However, the family is not interested in adopting the child. In these cases, the local department would begin the process of locating the adoptive home for the child. Once a child's permanency plan is changed to adoption by the court, the local adoption, excuse me, the local department would move forward with the plan. There are many steps involved in making the child legally free from adoption. Once the child is deemed legally free for adoption, the local department would move forward with finalizing the child's adoption. So that is just an overview, a little bit of an overview of what the process entails. So I thank you everybody for tuning in. I want to thank you all, Miss Sandra Rump Jackson. Thank you for tuning in. I think you are a new listener. This is my very first time seeing you in the comment section. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I thank you for tuning in, Miss Sandra. Thanks again for tuning in. And Miss Breezy, as always, I appreciate your support and your encouragement for every single show. So as I was saying, that was just an overview of what the steps take, what steps are taken in order to achieve that process. But when they talk about financial assistance, I want us to learn a little bit about that in terms of how the state of Maryland operates in that wheelhouse, so to speak. So, in terms of the financial assistance, it says that financial and medical help to support a child's adoptive placement is called adoption assistance. And regardless of your income, if you adopt a child with special needs, you may receive monthly adoption assistance payments and or medical assistance for the child. And these arrangements are made when the child is placed with you, and you will continue after the adoption is finalized. And your local Department of Social Services will educate you about the Maryland Adoption Assistance Program. And a lot of people ask questions like, what about the future? And it has answers for that too. It says that the legal responsibility of the local department ends when the adoption is finalized in a court of law. However, both public and private agencies will provide direct assistance or referral services when asked, even after the adoption is finalized. And it also gives you more resources and says that if you are interested in becoming an approved foster or adoptive family, the following steps should be taken. So it encourages you to contact the local Department of Social Services in the county where you reside, and the main number for each local Department of Social Service can be found on the DHS website under local offices. And it, it, it requests that you ask to speak to someone about becoming an approved foster and adoptive family. And the second thing that they ask for all of us to do is to attend a foster and adoptive parent information meeting held by the local department. And once you make contact with them, they can inform you of when the next information meeting will be held, and the meeting will help you learn all about becoming an approved foster and adoptive family. And you can also attend, as a third option, a mandatory 27 pre-service training. And this will provide you, well, the agency, the local department, will provide you with the necessary information in order to sign up for the pre-service. And it also talks about another organization called Adopt US Kids, and it's an initiative of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services Children's Bureau that was developed and operated by a collaboration of nationally recognized organizations that include the University of Texas, Austin School of Social Work, Northwest Adoption Exchange, North American Council on Adoptable Children, the Adoption Exchange, and spearheaded by the Adoption Exchange Association. So Adopt US Kids brings waiting children online through photographs and biographies, and a wealth of information is also available to help you learn more about adoption. And this organization also provides technical assistance to local departments of social services throughout the United States. So it finally, as in terms of talking about this specific initiative, it says that once you become an approved foster and or adoptive family in Maryland, local Department of Social Services staff will be available to help prospective foster or adoptive parents search for children that are legally free for adoption, and using the Adopt US Kids database service. And for example, it gives some examples and some scenarios you might find yourself in once you pursue this route. It says that you may request a specific age range, gender, and special needs of a child, and you may also indicate if you are interested in a sibling placement. The state of Maryland adoption program also utilizes the Adopt US Kids photo listing service to feature some of the available children who are legally free for adoption in Maryland. And these children are, are photo listed locally on the DHS website and nationally on www.adoptuskids.org. So this is just a general overview of what to expect when you pursue this route. Um, so um, it, it, Thank you, Miss Sandra, again for your support. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. Um, Again, that was just a general overview of what to expect when you go the adoption route, and these laws just apply for the state of Maryland. There are other ways to build your family as well. So you could build your family. You could adopt internationally. You could adopt through the foster care system, but you can also have a domestic adoption, which is what we're going to talk about this evening with Miss Claire Beaman at about 6:30. But I just wanted to ask you guys and just put it out there. Okay, what are some of your family structures like? I mean, people who've been adopted, and again, this message is for everybody, but I'm speaking to the adoptive families and the adoptive children who may still be children, but some who are adults. I want to ask you guys what that experience felt like, because I know that it's important to maintain a healthy wealth of knowledge and understanding about this entire process. I know that this is something that a lot of people within this community are passionate about. So I want to know what if you did pursue this route in order to build your family, what kind of support groups did you participate in or invest your time, your energy, and even your money into? Because I know that going the adoption route in order to build your family is a beautiful thing, and it's something that should definitely be recognized. So I just wanted to understand what you all went through and how this made you all feel. So I'm speaking to all of the people who've adopted children, who've fostered children, who maybe adopted children again through the foster care system, domestically or maybe even internationally. What has that experience been like for you? Because this is something that I'm pursuing. So I'm trying to educate myself as much as possible, and that's why Miss Claire Beeman is going to be joining us for the second half of the show. But these laws just apply for children within the state of Maryland. So all of these rules, all of these procedures and steps that you have to go through just apply to laws within the state of Maryland. But every state is different in terms of the laws that they implement, and as it pertains to this discussion and how people build their families and when they pursue this path and follow this route. So I just want to know, what did you guys experience? What did you guys go through? How did this make you all feel? Please feel free to leave your comments, down below in the comments section. So I do know a lot about private agencies, so I'm going to read a little bit about that. And I'm also going to read as much as I can before we speak to Miss Claire Beaman about the domestic infant program at Adoptions Together. So, private adoption agencies in Maryland must be licensed by the Social Services Administration. A licensed agency will deliver counseling, application, home study, and post placement services for a family or individual interested in adopting a child or having a child adopted. Now, private adoption agencies are the most frequent providers of international adoption services, since public agencies are usually more focused on the special needs children. Now, domestic adoption services are also delivered by private adoption agencies. Now, once a contract is signed with an agency, it is illegal to begin negotiating for adoption services with another agency. And all private agencies charge a fee for their services, and there is no limit on the amount an agency may charge. And again, these are rules that apply to the state of Maryland and what they practice and what they do. All private agencies will, however, inform applicants of the fee schedule. In the case of international adoption service, it is often necessary for an adopting family to travel to the foreign country and spend several days in order to finalize the adoption. And the private agency assists the family in this process. So again, that was just a general overview, and that's just a specific type of adoption. There are many types, and there are a wide variety of ways that you can build your family and find children to adopt. But you guys have so many options. We all have so many options. Whether you want a son or a daughter, a boy or a girl, or a sibling group, or however you want to build your family, there are resources out there for all of us to use. And I think that it's really good for us to develop a better understanding of what we're getting ourselves into when we pursue this route. I mean, it's so beautiful and it's such a blessing. It's a way for us to provide children, a little boy or a little girl, or a baby boy or a baby girl, with that discipline, that love, that support, and that structure that they need, so that they can be, so that they can be successful in the future, and so that they can feel loved by the people that they care about and that who raised them, and people who want to see them prosper. So that's important for us to understand. So I'm also going to read a little bit about just the history behind everything. So the Department of Human Services here in Maryland also has post-adoption search and contact reunion services that are designed to enable people that have been separated from birth relatives to reconnect. So that's a service that they also provide, and they also have another program, a registry, the Mutual Consent Voluntary Adoption Registry. And the first component of that is the mutual, again, consent voluntary adoption registry, which is called the registry. That's also what is shortened as. This is a passive listing of adult adoptees, birth parents, and birth siblings that are looking to reconnect. When an application is received, the information is entered into their system, and if a match is found, it is first verified to confirm the connection. Then both parties are notified and contact is facilitated. And the registry has been in place since 1986 and has over 4,100 names in it. And however, there aren't not many matches made. But that's just an example of a service that they provide in an effort to reconnect birth parents with their children. So another more history behind this. It says that the second component of this search service is when efforts are made to identify, locate, and engage the sought individual. And there are a few alternative approaches to identifying relatives. And the most direct way is by finding the adoption record. If the adoption was facilitated by an agency, then the organization's records usually have identifying information. and the process um, is all pertains to when the facilitating agency is known. Now, some adoptions are not facilitated by an agency, but rather an independent lawyer. And in this circumstance, the court record generally has needed information to identify birth relatives. And there are many jurisdictions in Maryland, and each one has its own way of categorizing and storing adoption records. And it's very helpful when registrants are able to identify to the court where the adoption was finalized and the adoption case number. So again, this is just general information that I really think that you all should know, because some people may want to go pursue a private adoption with an attorney, and some people may want to pursue their adoption through an agency. So we all have our preferences, and we all know what is most feasible for us and affordable for us, and we all should have a better understanding of how to go about this process. And it's all about what makes you comfortable when you pursue this. It's all about you being honest and transparent with your social workers, your case workers, and even your attorneys if you go that route, um, to know what's most feasible for you, because um, because that's what the matching process entails once you do the home study, and that's what I've been reading about, and that's what I've been really educating myself about. So this is all about what is going to work for us. So it's all about what's going to work for us and what's going to be the most suitable for the children or the child that we decide to adopt and raise. So there are no fees charged by the Department of Human Services for this particular registry. But once it's entered into the system and the local departments of social services do not charge for the search services, then private agencies may charge for search services in accordance with the established fee schedule. Now, some private agencies will accept reduced fees and some waive the fees, but it's not possible to know if a fee will be required or what the amount will be until after the application is processed. And in order to request that in a reduced fee, an applicant must complete a fee waiver form and it must be submitted with supporting documentation. And again, this is more about the costs that are affiliated with this, along with the general history behind it. And they note that it's such an emotional process that that everybody goes through, but it also notes that they provide tons of resources for all of us to use when we go this route. And they said that it's a highly emotional endeavor, and while a tremendously beneficial experience, the adoption process can also have conflicting aspects. So some people going through this process are encouraged to be aware of the potential fluctuations of emotions throughout the entire process, and they encourage everyone to seek assistance if needed. And the registrants can seek individual assistance or group help. So there are some group resources available through private agencies in Maryland, and none of the groups require the adoption to have been through the agency providing the group. And although two of the agencies are faith-based, who can be faith-based, neither require that group participants share their beliefs. And the support groups are for adoptees and birth family members, and that navigate through the process of adoption, contact, and reunion. Um, and it's also a person's right that they note to um, not want to contact is the right to decline. They note that. And for adoptions that were finalized after January 1st, 2000, a disclosure veto can be completed that specifies that contact is not to be made. And disclosure vetoes are also able to be rescinded if the person changes his or her mind, and they're maintained by the Department of Human Services. So I encourage everyone to look through the Department of Human Services website and figure out how they want to build their family. I encourage them to contact their local Department of Social Services and ask them about this process, because, again, these are laws that apply to the state of Maryland. If you live outside of Maryland, and if you're listening to this broadcast, I encourage you to do your research and find out what the laws are, the adoption laws are for your state, because each state has different laws that have been implemented, and everyone has different needs, and everyone has different desires in terms of how they want their family structure to look like, and what kind of matching they would like to have. But this, again, this is such an emotional experience. It's an emotional journey. So it's going to really, really take a lot of patience for everyone to who is pursuing this process, to continue to thrive and to continue to live their lives. Because I've learned through speaking to people who've done this and who are professionals and who have the credentials and who've worked with families, I've learned that the wait, it can be extremely difficult, but patience is key. Going through a home study and going through all the important information that you need to know about the medical history for children, and what their background is like, what the family dynamic is like with their birth family. Knowing all of that is going to be beneficial in the long run. So it's something that requires complete self evaluation, whether you want to pursue this as a single parent or whether you have a spouse, or if you and your significant other decide to pursue this. No matter if you're single or married or with someone, you have to really, really do a self assessment and a self evaluation. And it should not go without thought, and it should not go without a deep understanding. So I encourage everyone to educate themselves. So I was just reading all of the information that they provide from the Department of Human Services here in Maryland. So it's definitely beneficial to read, and I encourage you all to do your research and to contact your local department. Because again, as I stated before, we all have needs, we all have different likes and dislikes. We all know what we can accept and what we can't accept, what we like and what we don't like, and we all know what we're looking for, and all of us are different. We all aren't looking for the same things, and what may be suitable for you may not be suitable for someone else when you pursue this route. So once you talk to your social workers, and when you speak to your attorney, or when you talk to your caseworkers and counselors, you're able to walk through this process with them, and they're able to guide you along the way. So it's definitely something that I encourage you all to think about. I've fully committed myself to that. So I am doing all of my research, and I'm speaking to as many people who work in this field, and as many different social workers like Ms. Claire Beaman, and many other attorneys and other caseworkers, and even adoptive families and individuals, and who have followed this dream and who've achieved this dream. I'm speaking with a lot of people about this. So, excuse me, so that in a few years, once I start this process, I can be informed, and that I can continue to educate myself, and to just be open to um, all of the knowledge from the people who've already experienced what I'm about to embark on in the journey. So it's always nice to gain knowledge and expertise from someone in this area who either works or has fully embraced this process. So without further ado, I'm going to add Miss Claire Beaman to the stream. Again, I want you all to um, welcome Miss Claire Beaman from Adoptions Together to the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome Guy Radio. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking about adoption tonight, and Miss Claire Beaman is going to speak to us about working for the domestic infant program at Adoptions Together, and she's going to educate us about this process. She's going to talk about it as a social worker working with birth families and adoptive families, and she's going to educate us about this process, because a lot of people don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, and a lot of people um, they don't know the ins and outs of what it takes to prepare for this. So she's going to tell us more about that in detail. So Miss Claire, thanks again for agreeing to be a part of this broadcast. It was great. It's great that you took time out of your schedule to appear on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nelson. I'm excited. It's Adoption is a huge part of our community, and I agree with you. I think a lot of people don't know the steps it takes to adopt, or what it's like as a birth mother, or even as an adoptee. So I'm excited to shed some light on it.
Yes. So, yes, again, thank you for agreeing to appear on the show. And I know this is going to be an informative period on the show. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you decide that you wanted to pursue a career as a social worker?
Absolutely. So my name is Claire Beaman. I am originally from Alabama. I went to a small little school for undergrad in Mobile, Alabama, and I studied intercultural studies and sociology, like yourself, I believe, Nelson, with sociology. And then I moved to Columbia, South Carolina. There, I got my master's from the University of South Carolina in social work with a concentration in children, youth, and families. After grad school, I ventured up here with my husband, and I began working at adoptions together as soon as I moved up here, really. So first in Alexandria, Virginia, and then now I'm in Maryland. I would say for me, I think I started out knowing that I wanted to be a social worker not until college. Like before then, I thought, well, I really like working with kids and the family unit, but I didn't want to be a teacher. So I was like, well, how else can I incorporate, what I enjoy into a real job? And so I studied sociology, again, still trying to figure it out. And I found that social work was kind of the application of sociology. So again, still not knowing, okay, now I'm doing social work. What am I going to do? I was really interested in school social work. I still am. Maybe one day I'll venture into that realm, but I kind of just landed in adoption, and now I'm head in and really enjoying learning. I'm learning so much, even still to this day. And I think for me, it's a nice combination of like what I know about attachment and what I learned in school about attachment and how trauma affects you, and you know, really just learning how to advocate for birth parents, because I think that in the triad, the adoption triad, they're the ones that sometimes get overlooked or just misunderstood. So yeah, now I'm here.
Yes, it's really great to know that you've accomplished a lot, within your years of trying to figure out how you could serve best, and because you wanted to take your passion and you wanted to make a career out of it, but it's great that you figured out how to venture all of what you're passionate about into the career that you're in now. So it's really really great to know that and to understand it, how this has an impact on both families, because a lot of people, like you said, they don't look at it from two different angles. They just look at it from one point of view, and everybody plays a role in this entire community and this entire process. So I know that you work for you guys. The acronym is called DIP, but the Domestic Infant Program. So in other words, you help birth families you help adoptive families adopt infants. So could you tell us a little bit about that process, and what it entails, because a lot of people don't really know a lot about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. I work at DIP, or the Domestic Infant Program, at Adoptions Together. So really, when an adoptive family, is interested in adopting and making that step, they actually don't come to my program first. First, they would go through our home state department. So typically, you go online to the website, you make an inquiry, whether it's, a phone call, email, and you start an application. So an adoptive family would fill out the application, and then once it was approved, they get assigned a caseworker. So that caseworker is going to start the home study process with them. Typically, it ends up being about 3 interviews, one of which they actually come to your home to do a house check. But the interviews really are pretty intense, in some sense, right? Like they're getting to know you and how your relationship is. If you have a partner, they want to know about your upbringing, why you want to become a parent, your finances. Like they kind of have to dig a little. So they'll do the same social worker will do all 3 of those interviews, and then they in the meantime, you're also filling out some application or some more paperwork. You also have to have some background checks done through CPS, etc. And then at the end of the home study, once you've been approved, your social worker will actually draft a physical, sometimes 10-page document that is your home study. And then for our specific program, you actually join a wait list. So due to an influx last year, or actually in 2020, of the amount of people that were interested in adopting, we had to create a wait list essentially for the wait list. So the people in the wait list, they don't have to wait that long until they're brought into the active pool. And so what I mean by the active pool, that is the families who they first, like once they're kind of brought in, they do an intake. And so they go over the domestic infant program agreement, the fees that are associated with adopting, and then of course any questions that they have. And then ultimately they're creating a profile. So this is pretty common. I think a lot of people know this part about adoption, the fact that adoptive families will create an online profile and or a physical book that includes pictures of themselves, their family, their dog, whatever they want to include, as well as just like really talking about themselves, just so that the expectant parents can get to know them on a deeper level. So they're really just compiling a video maybe, and then that online profile. And then while they're in that waiting pool, it can really take, for us right now, it's about 18 to 24 months. Naturally, that's the average. Like there's people that wait less than that, and then some that wait more. But in the pool, we go through a matching process, and that's a little bit more complicated. But essentially, we don't want to match an expectant parent and then eventually a birth parent with an adoptive family if it's not a good match. For example, let's say the adoptive family only wants one visit a year, whereas the birth parent wants 3. That might not be such a good match. But then in other situations, we're able to provide the birth parents lots of profiles to look at, and then they have a really big part in deciding, who this child is going to be adopted by. So then after that, the adoptive family gets the fatal call, the one that they're waiting for years. And everyone's so excited. And the call is to say, you've been matched with a baby. So typically this is actually after the baby is born. Sometimes it's before, but we narrow down the details as far as placement and then placing the child, in the adoptive family's home. And after that, they have, again, the same social worker that they worked with for their home study will come and do post-placement reports. So typically it's 3 before the adoptive family can finalize. And then finalization is about 6 months after they've been placed with the baby. And then everything's official at that point. It's super exciting. All the legal stuff is, said and done. And then that long-term open plan that we typically make with birth parents is really starting to get into effect after the finalization with the letter and photo updates, visits, and then you've got the hard task of raising a child. But that's pretty much how the process works, at least with Adoptions Together DIP program.
Yes. And like I said, I was speaking to Mr. David Marshall with Journey to Josiah earlier, and he was talking to me about that process, and he told me that the wait is very emotionally impactful on a lot of individuals and a lot of families, because a lot of them, they're, especially if they are very open to, because I know that there are certain adoptive families and birth families that are looking, some of them are very open to different types of family structures, and some of them want a specific family structure for their child, and they may be looking for specifically a boy, or they may be looking for a girl. So I know that each and every birth family and each and every adoptive family is different. So I think that when we were talking about, he told me about how the the waiting process is the most emotionally consuming part of the entire process, because people, they may not know what they're going to get. But it's excitement, but it's also nervousness, because they don't know when they're going to get that call, and they may get it when they least expect it. But it is very exciting to know. And once you get all the hard stuff out of the way, you're just one step closer once you get over that hump to follow that dream. So I know that you guys said that the majority of your adoptions are open, and a very, very small number of your adoptions are closed. So I know that when we spoke last time, you talked about that. So could you tell us a little bit about how that has an impact on the children who grow up? Because I know that because the birth families and the adoptive families have to be on the same page with that in terms of what they want and what they don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. Majority of the adoptions that go through adoptions together are open, and I would say even beyond adoptions together, just across the country. And really, that's because the research points that it's the best for everyone involved. In the past, we didn't necessarily know that. And then a lot of longitudinal studies were done, following up with adoptees and birth parents and even adoptive families to determine, what's the best outcome. And we really found that when you have an open adoption, first, you've got the ease of mind, right? So you've got adoptees who are always wondering, well, what did my birth parents look like? What about my ancestry? What about this? What about that? That's natural. Like even people who aren't adopted, we're just curious. We want to know these things. And so if obviously if you have an open relationship, then you can have that open communication. Also for the adoptees, then they don't have this misconception, or it's not something that they end up wanting to hide or be embarrassed about. Like it actually becomes a sense of pride for a lot of people, like, yeah, I'm adopted. And I think sometimes adoptive families are a little hesitant just because they're not sure what that relationship is going to be like. And I've found that oftentimes adoptive parents are the first to be gung-ho about the relationship once they realize how beneficial it is. And it helps them to answer the questions that their adoptees are bound to have. And then for birth parents, there's a whole slew of reasons why, it's obviously super helpful for them, but there are, of course, some people who don't want any, it is completely closed. But for the other majority, I would say that, they are able to see, okay, whew, like breathe a sigh of relief, right? Like I chose a good family, or this baby is being taken care of, well loved. They've got everything that they need. I don't have to worry about them. And they're able to know that only by having those letter and photo updates or those visits, and still maintain some form of a relationship. And another misconception is that like birth parents are trying to get their baby back, or that adoptees are going to be confused about who their parents are. And we really found like that's not the case. Like they know, I grew up with this family, these are my parents, but also I have another set of parents, and that's great and wonderful. Just more people to love on the adoptees. So I don't think I answered your original question. I just kind of got off on a tangent. Can you say your original question again?
My original question was, I know that you guys, the majority of your adoptions are open and a small number of them are closed. So I wanted, you did explain it very well. I wanted to know which one you thought was more effective, or, from a child's standpoint, which one was more effective, because it's important to meet the needs of both the birth families and the adoptive families. And it's very important that that's clear throughout the process, so that everyone feels secure about their decision moving forward. So that's why. So you did answer the question,
Okay,
in
good.
detail. Yes, so you did answer the question in detail. So my next question is, why is it imperative to celebrate the adoption community? Because a lot of people who are misinformed about adopted children and adoptive parents, and the birth parents, and the birth mother, the birth father. A lot of people don't really understand what goes on in the mind of, for instance, the birth mother or the birth father. And a lot of people, unfortunately, they shed negative light on the birth family, and they're not really celebrated for making that decision. And like you said, on the other end, adoptive families, the misconception is that they fear that that their children, or that their child may love them less, or may choose um, not to bond with them anymore, after they really, really find out who their birth parents are. So, why is it imperative for people to understand that the adoption community should be celebrated from all angles and from all types of communities and all types of family structures?
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right, Nelson. There are so many reasons, of course, to celebrate. I mean, when you think about it, it's just another way that someone's choosing to grow their family. So, obviously, as you kind of touched on already, I think the natural thing in society and communities is to celebrate the adoptive parents. Like, oh, they're doing such a great deed, or not even deed, but like it's so great of them to adopt. And then unfortunately, the birth parents tend to be the ones that aren't celebrated as much. So in my opinion, as an advocate, that's who I end up trying to advocate the most for, because they are the ones, like birth parents are the ones having to make the hardest decision probably of their lives, right? Like it's something that they are coming to it from wanting, out of love. Obviously they want to do what's in the best interest of the child, and that's something huge. Like that sacrifice is something that I think we really, really truly need to celebrate more, and that will start to break down those misconceptions that we talked about they're gonna their adoptee might not have that sense of, well, why did so and so give me up for adoption or place me for adoption, when they have that relationship and can see, they loved me, they just did what was best for them in that moment. And there's obviously tons of reasons why people place for adoption, but I really think in the bottom line is birth parents usually get the bad rap and are not celebrated as they should be, because they are the ones making the really, really hard decision. And it is great that people are adopting and we can celebrate them as well. But if I were to put an emphasis on someone, just because of how society is, I would say we need to really celebrate the birth parents and what they're doing. And along with that, obviously, adoptees should not feel some sort of, I don't want them to feel different in a negative connotation or, in a negative way, because again, they didn't choose. Like that's just how their family came to be. And that's a wonderful thing. And, in another sense, like we can celebrate that adoption allows people who cannot have children one way or the other biologically, maybe it's a single parent, allows them to have a family. So that's a beautiful way to, celebrate those people who in other sense might not be able to have a family or at least have children. So yeah, it's a wonderful thing. Obviously I'm in it and I believe in it, but like I said, if I had to really encourage people to dig a little deeper and to think, well, why am I thinking this way about birth parents? I would say definitely need to be thinking about, what a sacrifice that they're making, and we need to be celebrating the birth parents.
Yes, and it is such a beautiful thing that should be celebrated. And having conversations like these, they can definitely open up doors for a lot of people. And it also shows you like the history of how adoption has evolved so much, because you didn't have a lot of these resources and a lot of these support groups decades ago, like you do now. And that's why there are many adults that probably may have been adopted or who grew up in the foster care system that unfortunately never had the opportunity to take advantage of these resources. It's really important for people to understand what those support groups are like and what those resources are. So, what kind of resources do you guys offer for people, the birth parents and the adoptive families, once the placement is done and once it's finalized? Because everybody has a different family structure, whether or not they're single. Because I know that you guys do transracial adoptions, LGBTQ plus, single parents. So, what kind of support groups are available for these families, the birth families and the adoptive families, and even the children who are involved?
Absolutely. So I would say we have a whole slew, right, of resources. So first with the adoptive families. So we have specific groups. So for example, TAG, which is Transracial Adoption Group. So we have a specific group for people who adopted transracially. Then we have just a general support group for adoptive families, adoptive parents. We also, of course, offer counseling through our agency for one-on-one or family counseling. And then for, resources as far as like we send books or videos or movies, anything to help in that, conversation for adoptive parents to talk to their children about the adoption of their child with their child, because we don't want it to be something that's hidden or that it's not talked about in everyday life. So we provide a lot of training and resources around how to have that conversation. And so in the same way, one thing that we do for adoptees is if let's say they have had a closed adoption, or maybe it was meant to be open and then over the years they've lost contact, or for whatever reason it's not been what they thought it would be, and now they've come to be 18, 21, and they want to know their birth parents more. They actually would contact me at Adoptions Together. That's part of my job as the post-adoption social worker. I facilitate what's called Search and Reunion, which is to connect adoptees with birth parents or birth parents with adoptees. So that's a really big resource that I think helps a lot of people, especially if it was a completely closed adoption, because they've grown up with so many questions. And even, like I said, even if it was open, maybe things have just fallen off and now they would like to maybe just meet or exchange email or a phone number with their birth parents, just to get to know them a little bit more. And then the other thing that I mean, majority of myself and Misha, my coworker, our job is working with expectant parents that may or may not become birth parents who place. So we do what's called all options counseling for everyone that we talk with. So, no matter where they're at in their pregnancy, we are going to talk to them about all their options, even though they're coming to us at an adoption agency. So, obviously talking about parenting, abortion, adoption, what maybe foster care or kinship care looks like, just to make sure that they're making the right decision for them and for the child. We try not to be biased. Obviously, we have to work at that because we are at an adoption agency, but we want to provide them with the counseling that they need for such a huge decision. And so we'll do that, throughout pregnancy. And then, of course, once they deliver, that's when we usually come to the hospital to sign paperwork. But then we work with them for up to 6 weeks, sometimes more, sometimes less, but around 6 weeks, doing, again, counseling after the fact, like after they've actually signed and when their parental rights have expired. So, let's say that they are placing, we also are trying to help them with medical and living expense fees, talking about birth parents. But then even if they aren't placing and they decide to parent, we still want to be an advocate and we still want to connect them with resources in the area if that's something that they need. So that's the nice things about Adoptions Together is like, we really just want to support people. And even if that means someone who's not placing, we'll still give them the resource that they need. So yeah, I think that's kind of a summary of everything that we did.
Yes, and like you said, there are tons of support groups out there, and there are tons of resources for people to take advantage of. So it's important to note that once the process is over and once it's finalized, it doesn't just stop there. You continue to educate yourself, and that's important for everybody to know. It doesn't just stop. Well, it doesn't just stop because the process is finalized, and you're learning and you're growing. It doesn't just reach a destination once that process is through. It's a journey. So and everybody has a different journey, and everybody's needs are different. So because this is about what's suitable for you and what's the most feasible for you on your journey, because everybody's different. Each and every person, each and every one of us, everybody who's a part of the adoption community, all of us have different needs, and all of us know what's good for us and what's not good for us. So that's what the support groups and resources are supposed to revolve around. So my last two questions before I let you go, and before the show ends. So how can the listeners get in touch with you in order to ask questions about this process, or if they're interested in building their families through the domestic infant program at Adoptions Together?
Sure. So really the best way to get in touch with me would be to email. So it's cbeaman, Beaman, at adoptionstogether.org. I can send that, or you have that, Nelson. You feel free to share that in the comments or whatever. I mean, even though I don't work in the home study department or in counseling, I can easily connect people with whoever, would be best fit. And then if it's an adoptee who is wanting to search or even just wanting to learn more about the process, then I would be the direct person to contact, as well as birth parents who would potentially be wanting to place a child. It would either be myself or my coworker, Mishan. So I would say just email me, and then I can point you in the right direction if I'm not the correct person.
Yes, yes, excellent. That's excellent. So my last question, my very last question is, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in working as a social worker and working in the field that you're working in right now? What advice would you give them if this is something that they're pursuing? Because I have some of my classmates. I'm a sociology student too at UMBC, so I'm finishing up my studies, and I have peers who are interested in pursuing their master's degrees in social work and beyond. So, what advice would you give them if they want to pursue what you've pursued?
I would say come and hang out with us. Come and hang out with someone who's in the field, even if it's not Adoptions Together, someone who is doing what you think you might want to do. I would venture to say most people would love to have someone come and shadow them, really just sit down and talk with them to learn, okay, this is what my day to day looks like. Just not being afraid to reach out to people, whether it's at adoption agency or foster care or, anything in your field that kind of seems interesting, because it's one thing to read about it or watch a movie or TV or whatever, but it's another thing to really talk with someone who's doing it day in and day out, and to sit down with them, maybe even go to their office or log on to Zoom and do part of their job with them for a day. So that would be my number one, and I'm happy to have, I have interns every semester from various colleges in the area, so I'd be happy to have someone join me as well.
Yes, well, thank you again, Ms. Beaman, for agreeing to appear on my show. This was a very, very informative discussion. It was much needed. I know that this has helped. This has helped someone. This has helped the listeners develop a better understanding of what it means to be a part of this community and to follow this journey and to know about the process. So I'm going to let you go, but thanks again for agreeing to hop on for this show, and I'll definitely keep in touch with you all as I follow this journey and as I learn more about this so that I can be a part of this community once it's time in a few years. So thanks again.
Thanks so much, Nelson. It was really nice talking. And yeah, we'll be in touch. Best of luck.
Thanks.
Bye.
So that wraps up another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I'm glad you all had an opportunity to join in on the conversation. I saw a lot of comments in the chat. I'm glad you all enjoyed this broadcast. Now, next week on January 18th from 6 to 7 p.m., we're going to have another guest. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do for next week. I have been planning a lot of shows for the month of February and for the month of March for Black History Month and Women's History Month. So I'm going to have a really, really amazing guest for the show. So we're going to revisit this conversation next month when we have Mr. David Marshall on the show from Journey to Josiah. That's his organization. That's his vision. So he's going to talk about his story and the work that he does with Journey to Josiah Incorporated. He's going to talk about his show and the work that he does. And we're going to revisit this discussion because he also went through Adoptions Together in order to build his family. So it's going to be a very, very great discussion in next month. But I have shows planned for Black History Month and for Women's History Month. So I'm still getting things together for next week's show. But I thank you all for tuning in. You all are amazing. I can't thank you enough. I'm glad you all enjoyed this conversation. We're going to revisit this, and we will be talking about this again with Mr. David Marshall's story in about a month or so. So again, make an appointment to meet me back here at 6 p.m. on January 18th, 2022. So this is the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. Feel free to like, subscribe, and to share these broadcasts with your family members, your friends, and people within your circle so that we can all feel informed, inspired, and uplifted in the process and as we all go through these difficult times. So stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy. I love you guys, and I will see you next week. And again, feel free to subscribe, to leave comments down below. Subscribe to Awesome Guy Radio's outlets on YouTube, all of the social media outlets: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. And also follow us. Follow me at Nelson E. Brown and Nelson Brown on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all of the social media outlets that you can think of. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.